Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available the following week wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI, a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 100. Will AI replace software engineers? Plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite. Their cloud ERP helps provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. Podcast followers can get preferred pricing of up to 45% NetSuite. My co-host today is Kieran Gilmurray. He's a senior analyst for IRPA AI, author and industry thought leader, globally recognized authority on AI, automation, and digital transformation, have offered multiple influential books and hundreds of articles that have earned him prestigious accolades, including the top 50 global thought leader and best LinkedIn influencer for AI. Kieran, it's good to know that content has not been all outsourced to AI yet.
Not yet, no, but it's fascinating because I've been spending the last couple of weeks playing with ChatGPT, deep reasoning, and watching some of the outputs that it comes out with. And I'm sort of sitting there going, why not? But it's interesting how your mind goes through convolutions. And I was talking about this the other day when I was having a conversation with someone who said, I feel really guilty using it. It's a bit like cheating in my exams at school, which made me wonder, what were you doing to cheat in your exams in school in the first place? But it is one of those things at the moment where you're looking at this technology and it is just enabling crazy amounts of stuff. My sons are doing homework on it. My other son is thinking of buying a house, and he redesigned the layout of the house and put in financial projections and everything. The tool is coming on leaps and bounds. And later on, we're going to talk about software engineers and the impact on them, because I was hosting a conference in Belfast this week for 450 software engineers. And let's just say AI last year was 2 sessions out of the whole day. This time it dominated the day.
Yeah,
Fun times.
I bet. Yeah, so we'll get to that in a moment. Before we do, headlines for this week. The first bunch are social media related, Kieran. The US FTC's trial against Meta began this week. Mark Zuckerberg testified yesterday. The tech giants fighting off these lawsuits that are trying to push back on their acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp, and really, may set the tone for, tech companies in general being able to acquire startups in the US.
Yeah, this one's fascinating for me, Dan, because a while ago, Europe was getting an absolute kicking by the US administration for even coming near any of the technology companies. So now to hear the US administration that's in currently is actually giving them a little bit of a kicking to say, look, we want competition to happen. That kind of feels cool in a way. Now, it's always the balance between, innovation and exploitation. So if they're deliberately buying them to knock someone out of the market, it's not the first time a company has done it, never mind anything else. But if it stifles innovation, definitely, I'm all for someone intervening, because these tech giants are transnational, trans-global groups that have such power that it's absolutely phenomenal and unreal. But if it is, genuine good business strategy, like Zuckerberg at the time mentioned, they're buying, hundreds of millions of users. Why wouldn't you want to combine the network effects together of different applications to put you in a more powerful position? So like everything in life, where does innovation start, begin, and end? Where does healthy competition begin and end? And where is the right of a company to try and gain as much leverage in a market as is humanly can? I'm glad I'm not making the rules, but I always like innovation and competition because it normally produces something better for us consumers. That said, we're not consumers. We're given free platforms, which are never free. So we're the subject of some form of dare I say, exploitation at the best of times.
I have two problems with this. I think one is, they claim, as you alluded to, that well, first of all, the question is it a social media monopoly, right? I would argue no, right? There's a whole nother set of assets owned by its chief rival in Google, right? So I don't think it meets at least the traditional definition of a monopoly. And they're saying, again, as you alluded to, that it's stifling innovation, but I don't know that it is, right? I mean, if a startup comes out and creates something that Facebook has not created and Facebook buys it, is that actually not propelling innovation? If you can create something that the big guys can't figure out on their own, and they're willing to give you a whole bunch of money and buy it from you, is that not the American dream? I don't know. I don't think that passes muster. I guess the question is, if they get too big, then down the road, does it stifle competition and innovation?
Don't know. It's pretty much the Irish dream there as well, by the way, for someone to give me hundreds of millions.
The other side of it is, I don't need to tell anybody watching this right now what uncertainty does to markets. We're not talking tariffs today. We talked tariffs last week, but markets don't like uncertainty. And I think one of the challenges, in the business climate right now in the US is it's full of uncertainty. I mean, this case is about an acquisition that they made in 2012. They acquired WhatsApp 2 years later in 2014. It's 11 years later, right? So if they approved the acquisition then, is it just change in course? Is it change in administration? Whatever it is, it makes it very difficult for businesses to be businesses if everything's going to be, scrutinized. It's one thing to scrutinize it when you're making the acquisition, but to scrutinize it 10 years later.
Yeah, it's interesting, this one, because it could be a play to get Zuckerberg to bend further at the knee, if that were even humanly possible, based on what we've seen in the press a little while ago. I seen one of the propositions was they overpaid paying $1 billion, and you're going, no, that's cheap. You know what I mean? And sometimes when you look at what's actually happening, with retrospects on, they got it massively right, absolutely massively right. They bought a huge amount of customer information. Now they're able to exploit that six-way sideways. The business has grown immensely. I think the key one is, though, the intent of the purchase, Dan. Did they buy it to take out someone deliberately to reduce competition, or was this a genuine business move at the time? And that's for this group to determine. But it does feel slightly odd that it's 18 or 20 years later we're having the conversation. Unless, of course, Facebook lawyers have had everybody tied up for the last 18 years in litigation, and therefore now it's only getting through all of that hurdle. Nothing would surprise me when the world of law and tech come together.
Yeah. So that's happening over on that side of social media world. On the other side, OpenAI is reportedly building a social network. Sam Altman posted on X about this a while back in one of his X Twitter arguments with former founder Elon Musk. But there's a bunch of sources this week that says they're actively developing it. So now you have another AI platform joined at the hip with a social media platform, exactly like what Elon Musk has done with or is doing with X. So interesting times.
Yeah, Musk's interesting move, isn't it? He's suddenly now, dare we say, doing a Facebook, in that now he's got access to a couple of 100 million additional users for his XAI platform by putting Twitter into the same, or X into the same family. You never know what's going on here. Is this a little bit of a shot across the bow by Altman to say, well, if you do that, I'm going to do this? It feels a bit of a distraction compared to core competency that they've been developing at the moment. And let's just say it's not the first time that someone has tried to create another social network similar to X, and it just hasn't really worked. And there maybe goes back to the previous argument, is that when you buy up all the users the first time round, it gets really sticky to move across social media platforms. So rather than breaking the companies up, what might be interesting is if you made your social profile a hell of a lot more portable, then you would remove a huge barrier to entry. Because if I move, for example, from YouTube or LinkedIn to something else, I can't easily take all of my data across, build it all back up again without immense amount of effort and port all my users at the same time. So it's a massive barrier to stop me moving in the first place. Banks were like that, you'll remember, decades ago. Now you can move your bank account in an afternoon. The only funny thing is none of us do. So even making social profiles portable, the bit you lose is access to your network, because you'd have to get all of them to come with you. But this is what I like to see. I like to see innovation. I like to see competition. It breeds, new stuff that we can benefit as from consumers, understanding the Faustian bargain, of course, that nothing's for free and we are the product.
Yeah. Well. Other news, NVIDIA is going to have a $5.5 billion selling its chips to China, according to their most recent filing. Bloomberg is saying that these restrictions could cost just this year. So, as we talked about before, the turbulence around the tariff world. They've also announced this week, though, that they're planning on building, testing, and packaging $500 billion worth of AI devices in the U.S. Over the next 4 years. So, there's both sides of the coin, I guess. We'll see how it shakes out. But some of the pro administration tariff people are already waving the victory flag here.
Yeah, interesting one as well. Remember, we used to talk about 1 million being a big number, and then 10 million, now 100 million. Then don't worry about 5.5 billion. It's a small piece of the pie. And again, a two-pronged strategy, and not unwise, shall we say, with the current administration by NVIDIA to build their production facilities in the US. We may find that may influence decision-making, but there's a lot of geopolitics going on, Dan, isn't there, with AI and chips? There's a lot of games being played internationally about giving, your somewhat largest rival, in other words, China or other countries, access to cutting-edge technology, which may allow them to outcompete you in the AI and the digital race. Whether that's right or wrong, that's for someone else to decide. As I said, as long as everybody is openly sharing all they've got and the world becomes more competitive and beneficial for you and for I'm all for it. But again, these games have been played out not just through chips, but through access to supply lines and companies and everything else over the decades. So it'll be interesting to see how this storm rides out. But from a world economy perspective, sitting in the middle here, shall we say, in Ireland, having the US and China fight to a zero-sum outcome probably isn't the healthiest for the rest of the world, never mind each of those two countries as well. Not a fight that I would like to see worn down to the bitter end.
About this last week, we talked about tariffs. There's questions about how viable it is, whether or not there's enough labor in the U.S. to be able to, actually fulfill on these promises, and even if there are, the time and investment required to bring, repatriate, all this manufacturing. NVIDIA is saying it's going to have all of its domestic production of the Blackwell chips already has started in Arizona, and they're going to ramp up over the next year or so at plants in Texas. But it's not always so simple. I know Apple came out and I think it was earlier this year, came out and claimed another $500 billion investment in U.S. manufacturing, but that was going to cost them $30 billion in 3 years to do it. So 3 years is a long time, especially in the AI and technology world.
No, it's a lifetime, but good luck, US workers, because there isn't enough of you. And therefore, the only thing that happens when there's a shortage of supply of something is the price goes up. And you're right, 3 years to do it is too long. But again, if you take what the administration is purportedly saying, you're going to have to suck up some pain in the short term. How short the short term is, who knows, for a longer term gain. The most comical part, though, is not in a nice way, but the barbs going out against China about peasants, being made by senior politicians. Always like our politicians behaving, by the way. I like a modicum of calmness and intellectual rigor, which doesn't always come through in any country. But they're repulsed by, folks in China who are sending out emojis of, terribly stereotypical, caricatures of Americans trying to fiddle to get very unique, tiny things done. And it was interesting watching, the head of Apple say, look, it hasn't been about cheap labor in China for years because it isn't cheap. The same with India, as I've discovered over the years. What they've actually done is moved up the quality line, and the ability and dexterity of folks in China and India and other countries to actually manufacture the most sophisticated of technologies is the bit that's kept them there. So it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out over the next period of time. But again, with respect to America, it's America's choice what they do or don't do with all of their technology and their money and their businesses and all of their rules. From a semi-independent perspective, would hate to see a global battle that would result in a global recession, because all of us are going to suffer. And we're already seeing that with tariffs at the moment, where prices are rising up everywhere. Everybody's panicking about their markets. And let's be honest, nobody's particularly clean on this, because most countries around the world have tariffs in place in some regard and are quite happy to defend them. Whereas actually, what does free trade mean? And free trade isn't free, because we can all see the results of capitalism. Someone will get an advantage, a local or a country's industry will be destroyed. And then at some stage, is that going to be used as a political weapon? Now, if I say China or other parts of the world, here's the downside, Dan. I now worry about our American friends, because if I become dependent on American AI, American fighter jets, American data centers, American social media, are you going to restrict me accessing that at some stage? So now the uncertainty and the doubts in the market, this geopolitics, could extend in ways that none of us would actually want or like. And that's not a comfortable place for any of us sitting outside of the US at the moment. It doesn't bear well, shall we say.
Yeah. And Apple, related to Apple, they have had some criticism lately over lack of AI features, and I think part of the challenge for them has been, balancing this AI arms race with their, commitment, or at least branding around privacy. But they were in the news this week because they've announced a new approach to using synthetic data combined with differential privacy. Maybe you can define that for me, to keep data secure. So they're saying by generating synthetic emails and polling and anonymized kind of snippets of data, they can kind of fine tune their AI, but also keep from exposing real user content and data.
Yeah. So what they're using essentially is real user data, using AI to anonymize it, and then training their systems on the anonymized data. And as long as they do it right, fine. Do you know what I mean? Because the argument a while ago is there isn't enough data left in the world to train all these models. So anything that's done for privacy, fantastic. Although, let's be honest here, Apple have always given us, good stuff, and they've always given us pause for thought. So, for example, the Apple Store, where they banned a lot of people on it and kept a tight monopoly, isn't exactly the work of in my term only. And it's not a criticism of Apple. I adore them and I adore the products. I have too many of them. But again, it's like, I giveth, but I taketh, So when I hear a global giant telling me all the wonderful things they're giving me, it reminds me of an old PR consultant years ago who said, Kieran, when there's a problem, what you want to do is encourage people to look over here, not look over there. So as the moment I see this, I'm going, right, what's actually happening over to the left-hand side now that I can see allegedly what's happening on the right? Yeah. Let's see how it turns out. But synthetic data is massive. It's a key thing. If it does help privacy, I'm all for it, because there's just too many instances, Dan, of moving too quickly, exposing our data, leaving us vulnerable to hacks. And I looked at something the other day that said my personal data with companies that I've been involved in 17 times in the last year, most of the time we don't even hear about it, It's thank goodness for antivirus software packages that we can do this. Thankfully, I think it's 99% of my stuff is two-factor authenticated. So good luck getting my mobile number and my email address and my PIN code and everything else to try and do something.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Kieran. So let's get to our main topic today, which is a question we wanted to pose, which is, will AI replace software engineers? And is this a quick show, Kieran? Is the answer just yes, and we can wrap this up, or no?
Yeah, well, yeah, but be a bit boring show, wouldn't it? A bit like Hamlet, and you know what's going to happen, but unless he,
I'm going to get so much hate mail after this.
Yeah, no, it's more nuanced currently. Let me explain currently, because you and I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, the one person, $1 billion company. And if you look at Mid-Journey, for example, per person, it's like 10 people, and per cap, that's about 150 million a person if you take whatever it was put together. And it's not the first time you've had small numbers running a company. I think when Microsoft bought or Facebook bought Instagram, whoever bought it, there was a tiny number of people using huge amounts of technology to do things. And now you will start to see that with agentic labor coming in, because I was talking to someone last week on a podcast, and they have the one person insurance brokerage, which now has underwriters and actuaries and sales agents and claims agents and all in one person. And you go, it's not possible. Trust me, it is. I've seen it in the real world. On this one here, coding's logical. Do you know what I mean? Coding by design, coding with security in mind, coding with accessibility in mind. I was spending a lot of time talking about that this week. It's logical, and it's getting better, and it's getting better and better. And as I said, that conference I was at in Belfast this week, Beltech, really good annual conference in Northern Ireland with the best of the best. Last year there was 2 sessions on AI, and I'd said, look, folks, we need more. This year there was about 9 or 11. And when I see some of the progress the software engineers are making using AI, Dan, to allow them to achieve more and do more, the phenomenal pace of this change has even surprised me, and I'm rarely surprised. And that's only in 12 months. So what happens in another 12 months? And now the people who are coding this are correcting it and fixing it and teaching it, much like you and I are teaching the algorithms, the pluses and the minuses. But this is big consequences. So can I replace software engineers? Well, vibe coding at the moment would tell you could. In other words, you don't even need to code. And this came out from a term from our friends in OpenAI, who said, just tell it the intent, which sounds amazing, but it's still not there yet. And how do I know it's secure? And how do I know I've built this in code that doesn't have backdoors and everything else? So the best software engineers are absolutely in demand, and they still will be. The great software engineers will use AI to achieve even greater things. But companies will use this to allow them to do more and achieve more with far less people. And at the pace we're going at, and I remember a stat that said, I think it was OpenAI entered a competition, I could be wrong in this, and they were 1 millionth out of 1 millionth in coderland. This year, they ended up at number 50. That's after a year. So what happens, and we need to forget looking now, we need to prepare for 2 and 3 years' time. Where are the software engineers going to be at? Already there's a shortage, but in a couple of years' time, I won't want to pay for them. And again, there's a declining birth rate, which will accelerate, further AI. The cost of software engineers is not my words, but in companies' words, still too much. So all the drivers are there to make this work. And I think I posted today on LinkedIn something OpenAI were doing as well, saying, look, software engineers, you're screwed, practically. Weren't saying it in those words, as an Irish phrase. So I think definitely the software engineering, as it's currently sitting, is stuffed. The software engineering that will come out in the future, absolutely exciting and amazing. Where do you sit, my friend?
Yeah, I think this falls in the same category as some of the other areas that we've talked about, assistants, customer service reps, content creators. It will, I think initially be a productivity enhancement for existing workers. It will be more job evolution than job extinction for now. I would say for now, as you did. It's gonna change the makeup of the average developer's average day, right? Instead of doing some of the more it'll allow them to kind of focus on higher value work, right? On more creative work and less of the monotonous kind of stuff. But at some point, right, I think it goes beyond that. And it reminds me of one of the articles I read this morning. I think it was in the New York Times. Was talking about the fact that it creates an atmosphere where a lot of the work that would normally be given to more junior resources, entry level resources, won't need to be done by people. And it reminds me of years ago, some of my attorney friends telling me that it was becoming very, very difficult to become an attorney because all of the grunt work that made people kind of earn their stripes and also learn how to become a good lawyer was being automated, right? And so it was becoming, people were losing their on-ramp into the legal profession. I think that may be, one of the main concerns here of, if you want to be a developer, if my kids want to be a developer, will it be harder to do it? And then you're right. I think at some point, inevitably, with productivity increases comes, I just need less people to do this. Maybe it's a cost thing, maybe it's a productivity thing. But at the end of the day, just like I've said before, I think you're going to need 10% of the customer service reps that you need now. Do you need only 10% of the developers that you have now?
Well, this is the interesting bit, and maybe we're judging things with our current worldview and our current mindset and our current way of thinking. And someone I was talking to this morning had a beautiful analogy, and what they said was, remember decades ago, people were digging in a field, and then they introduced a tractor. Could you get anybody to dig in a field? And the answer is no, you couldn't. And then they said, well, remember all those people who worked in the fields went into an office and they did ledger work. And finance ledger work was considered the highest of jobs. It was intellectually and cognitively fulfilling. It was intellectually and cognitively elite work. And now we automate the life out of that. So maybe we need to rethink software engineering and a lot of other jobs and our perception of what do we actually consider to be cognitive or intellectual work that's worth doing, and redesign how we go about doing work to free individuals up to move into a newer, more interesting, productive, more creative, more fun way of working, where maybe, as you say, doing all that grunt work that's currently sophisticated and intelligent and sometimes takes you 3 and 4 years of a college degree or whatever, is just rethought differently. And the same thing with, computer scientists, data engineers, the same thing with customer services rep. My only worry is that we so focus on giving everything over our agency, our jobs and everything else to AI, that we don't actually plan forward for the future. So what are governments doing? What are employers doing? What are educators doing? Or what are we doing? As I advised folks 12 months ago, I said, it isn't a matter of whether this will replace you or will replace parts of your job. It will. The question is, how do you retain being valuable inside of your current or future organization? And what is it that you're going to do to augment and learn AI and do the things that AI can't, so that you remain productive, valuable, innovative, and everything else in between? Yeah. Or what career you're going to think. So this for me is more redesign of work to take advantage of what's there. Otherwise, we're going to be pushing water uphill. And as I've discovered many a time, pushing water uphill doesn't work. It just takes lots of effort. So now, how can I get myself in a position where I'm valuable for all the right reasons?
Yeah, maybe it's back to that, the ATM analogy for automation. Maybe there's less tellers, but now you have, ATM repair people and software develop. So, maybe it's the same thing. One of the things that, interestingly enough, there was an article in the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics about, the need for more advanced skills, right? So, to your point, now, maybe the average developer is in trouble, but those who, are able to do the more advanced work, are actually certainly right now, more in demand. According to the World Economic Forum jobs report for 2025, AI and ML specialist, AI integration engineer are amongst the top two increasing demanded roles. So, at least for a time period, there's going to be a need for specialization and more advanced skills. So, as I beat my dead horse, things I've been saying, if you haven't already started doing that, you're behind, but you still have a little bit of time because, at some point I think the generalist thing is going to go away in the software development world, just like it's going to go away in a lot of other industries.
Yeah, I'm somewhat mixed on that. So we'll maybe disagree healthfully on this one here, because the world is changing so quickly that to be a specialist means you're almost setting yourself up to lose your job within a defined period of time. Whereas the ability to learn and unlearn and to change and to grow and to jump between careers, that may be the not the kryptonite, but the sunlight that actually drives change and drives your career forward. Because I know at the moment, I forgot, I have given up counting, Dan, but I'm on career number 16. And if I hadn't have actually changed, then I know I would offer less value to employers. And I know if I offer less value to employers, then I'm out of a job. It's interesting because I go on stage all the time and I say, have jobs changed? Am I surprised by what the World Economic Forum or the UN or the US government or whatever say about, needing more cognitive skills, needing more agility, needing more flexibility? And honestly, I'm not, because this has always been the case. And I use the phrase, there's a lot less saddlers than there are software engineers. It'll be interesting in the next couple of years' time where I say there's a lot less software engineers and there's a lot more, and whatever that a lot more will be, that will be the interesting part. Any of those people who now get that right when they land in 2 or 3 years' time are just going to get paid a fortune. But here's the second challenge. Do we have time? And when I say do we have time, the pace of technology change is extraordinary. But to do a degree or to go to college takes you, 4 or 6 or 7 years, depending on whether you start early or whatever you're doing. I don't think that's a sustainable model. So how do we actually prepare people through work placements or apprenticeships or work plus college or work plus university or work plus practical experience to get all of the bodies we need into play much more quickly, not just for now, but in 2 and 3 and 5 years' time? That, I think, is the real challenge, regardless of it being a software engineer, a customer service rep, or whatever else. That's a bit that I'm not seeing a lot of. I'm seeing a lot of people saying jobs will change, but I'm not seeing a lot of jobs are going to change, by the way. Here's the career path you need to go on. Jump on now. Here's your first hurdle. Remain a bit flexible, but generally this is the direction. And therefore, if I'm starting out in my career, not only am I going to find it harder to get the on-ramp, but I want to make damn sure I'm going to pick the right on-ramp. And if you're now asking me to spend $40, $60, $100,000 on an education that may not be worthwhile in a couple of years' time, then that's huge ramifications for, government jobs, universities, colleges, and me, all of those things and everything else in between, So how do we need to change education and workplaces in the world to actually make us valuable? Because if we're not, and we're not producing the goods, then companies are going to accelerate further with AI, because let's be honest, it's the cheapest it's ever been, and it's only going to go in one direction, which means cheaper still. My full-blooded, I should say now, I upgraded to ChatGPT full. I have an army of PhDs sitting there, redesigning houses, coming up with ideas, challenging me, all sorts of stuff at a level that's extraordinary. And that's getting better and better and better all the time. Are we as humans getting better and better and better all the time? We can't compete, I think, in lots of ways. So where do we compete?
Yeah, I think I like simple analogies, right? So I'm at a hockey game yesterday, and I walk into the store, the merchandise store, and there are 12 registers, completely kiosks, really, self-checkout kiosks, right? And there's one person, actually there's two. There was one person who looked like a manager and one person that was kind of just dealing with traffic flow or whatever because it was busy, right? I'm thinking to myself, that's a place that would have had, what I say, 12, 14, 15 employees 3 years ago. Now there's 2, right? Because inevitably there'll be an issue. Inevitably a customer will want to speak to a person. Inevitably there'll be a baby boomer who can't figure out how to use the key, whatever it is, right? But those are stark numbers. So I think about what the person that's there. I didn't ask him, but the person that's there overseeing everything may have been a cashier at one point, but that's a subset of those 12 people. And it's a subset of those 12 people that, that job is probably not in whatever the analogy would be, the cashier, processing management. That person was probably in store management, right? In retail management, right? A different degree. Think about a school. There's teachers and there's administrators. He's the administrator, right? Not everybody who was doing checkout at one point, wanted to be or was capable of doing, management. I think that's where, things go in all these industries. And, you bring up a great point, which I've been, thinking about for a while, which is, what does the government do when every job out there, goes from 12 employees to 2 employees? Are we creating enough additional positions with more skilled people? Maybe there's 3 of those stores now instead of 1 of those stores. That was the ATM thing, right? The ATM thing supposedly created more bank branches and therefore more jobs as a result of that technology. So that's why that was okay and didn't create net negative jobs, but it did create different jobs. And so, it makes you wonder, maybe this U.S. policy isn't as crazy as we think, with bringing some of the jobs back, manufacturing jobs back, because what are you going to do with the workforce who's not, educated enough to be a senior AI ML analyst?
Yeah, well, that people will want to work in factories, and again, I sort of look in Ireland, there's more than enough jobs, but some of those jobs are in bars, supermarkets, support services, picking vegetables in fields, and nobody wants to do it. So there's always labor shortages. But here's the ugly truth, Dad, and we need to start talking about the ugly truth. Otherwise, we're going to sleepwalk into a future where we are in trouble. Same thing yesterday, walked into a supermarket, there would have been multiple tills. They'd all disappeared in a week. No longer do I get someone to talk to or walk past or do something. It was same thing, one person minding 16 checkout counters, telling us idiots the same thing that we're all doing wrong. And that was it. And this is going to happen not just in cashiers. This is going to happen in software engineering. This is going to happen in financial advice. This is going to happen in banking. The so-called intellectual skill jobs. And trust me, do a manual job, folks, for a day and see if it's not skilled. But the office jobs where there's computers or technology, or the job can be impacted by technology, they're going to disappear. And we're not talking about, I've seen one so-called influencer today talking about it's the analyst and it's the data entry people. Look, let's not be silly. That was done away with years ago using RPA. We're talking about now about financial advice. We're talking now about interior designers, as I mentioned earlier on, where I'm able to use ChatGPT or one of the tools to give it a picture of a room and to design a house and what we're doing. We're talking about writing. We're talking about art. We're talking about every job that AI can go at. To your comment many a month ago, Silicon Valley's war on people, they've declared it. And it's going to be an ugly war unless we do something about it. So maybe this is the call to action or call to arms, not just for software engineers, but every role out there that can be touched by AI will be touched by AI. And if you think it won't, I'm not trying to scare you, but I hope I scare you enough to get you to do something about it. It will. So the question is, and I never wait on governments, I work with what I can control, and that's me. What is it that I'm going to do to make myself valuable in a world that's increasingly AI and technology driven? Because if I don't take ownership of this now and do it pretty quickly, then I think I'm pretty stuffed when it comes to my job prospects and earning prospects.
Its opinion on this, right? So I decided to go into ChatGPT and ask it, what are the top 2 pros of AI replacing human developers, and what are the top two cons. So the top pros, obviously productivity and cost was the first one. The second one was consistency and scalability, right? Thinking about, how much, and this dates back to automation, the benefits of automation, RPA, which you just mentioned, right? Being, hey, you have all this institutional knowledge that goes away or gets turned over every time you lose an employee, hire an employee. So, interesting, obviously learning capabilities, you could, in theory, scale much bigger because, the AI can figure out, what's working well, what's not working well, do larger scale projects, monitor, projects better. So I thought that was interesting. But on the negative side, two things. One was lack of context and creativity. The other was, code, it lacks the comprehensive testing, debugging, and iterative improvements that seasoned developers can bring to ensure high quality software. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, the second one I disagree with. Those two I disagree with. Let me explain why. I've met some really crappy coders. I really probably hired a load of them. But now I have the opportunity to get AI to make every test imaginable, monkey test, regression tests, make synthetic data, do a whole host of tests 24/7 that no human team could possibly do, imagine, or deliver for the cost of AI. So immediately that one's out the window for me. So I think AI is doing itself a disservice. The other bit, and I hear this all the time, is AI creative? Is AI intelligent? I don't give a shit. I want AI to be useful. So I don't care what it is. And AI is useful. Let's be honest, your average human being isn't the brightest thing that was ever created. Do you remember iRobot and Will Smith? And Will Smith says, can a robot create a Michelangelo? Can it play a symphony like Mozart? Can it do this? To which the robot turned around and says, can you? And I burst out laughing, thinking, no, the average human can't. And most of us are prompt engineered. How did I learn some of the things that I know? Someone who knew more than me told me, and then I found out they were wrong until someone better told me. And therefore, what is creativity? Is it, few of us are genuinely geniuses. We're not all Donatello or Versace or Chanel. We're just not. And therefore, what we do is we reproduce stuff that's an amalgam of something else, or we're prompted by someone to move to the left and to the right. And therefore, AI is going to replace, the 65% of us who aren't emotionally intelligent, the multitude of us who aren't creative beings, and. So again, even then, I think the answer is more nuanced. And again, AI is doing itself a disservice.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, what is it that we actually do? And if we go back to software engineers, then my one is, I want to be known as the company that delivers and ships the best code ever at the most affordable price, that's been tested the most, that does everything that has been UX tested, and all of the AI doing the UX testing for my ICP. That's where true value exists. And the next engineers that I get in onto the on-ramp, it's just not going to be the same onboarding. In other words, I'm not going to stick you in a corner, teach you to do particular lines of code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an AI, and you're going to be able to deliver code, create code, and test code from beginning, middle, and end. And the real skill is going to be helping you identify from a human perspective what really good UX is, because AI will very rarely understand that. I'm going to teach you the skills to be more emotionally intelligent so that you can work with the business to deliver more and better software that absolutely delivers the business outcomes that it needs. And I'm going to encourage you to use AI to fill in all the gaps that you don't know, to fix all the mistakes that you'll inevitably make, and to teach you how to build applications in the most secure way that allows you to deliver phenomenal value, not for one client every 6 months, but you're going to be doing 50 releases a day, and you're going to be working for multiple clients at once, enlarging the pie so that I hire more developers tomorrow morning, so that there will be less software engineers and more AI, business outcome delivering champions who deliver exceptional code first time round, every time round, not once every 3 months or 6 months, but every 20 minutes. That's the ambition we need to aim at, to create more value everywhere from everyone, so that we create something that is akin to something more sustainable than actually the AI is going to take over and we're all out of a job.
Yeah, and I like your earlier point. I think we get pulled into these very binary questions and conversations. Will AI replace my job? Yes or no? I think the reality is, if you're really good at your job, no. If, for the rest of you, yes, right? And it's funny. I was on this call where I've been we've been ERPA experimenting for the last 6-9 months with a lot of conversational AI to do outreach to members, AI to do sales and marketing and those sorts of things. And I was talking to somebody, earlier this week, and they said to me, is it really good enough to, replace a person? And I said, it's good enough to replace most of them. It's good enough to replace the average employee. But to your point, right, the goal is to ultimately get it to learn and to be a scalable version of your best person. So on the sales front, is it better than my best salesperson? No. Is it better than the average salesperson today? Yes, in this case it is. So I think that's the litmus test. I don't think it's the Turing test. I think it's, is it better? Is whatever use case your employee? That to me is the litmus test.
Yeah, well, this is the thing that people are forgetting. We're in version 4.5 or 2. It depends on the company.
Yeah, every day, yeah.
But that's only in 2 years. And now let's say the software is better than your average employee, and pick a role, pick an industry. It doesn't really matter. So what's 2 years' time going to look like?
Oh, yeah.
That's the scary bit, isn't it? So can it replace most people doing most things? Not now. Can it, or will it replace most things most people do in 2 years' time? The answer is yes. So now, a bit like the saddlers and the software engineers, or the farmers and the office workers, now we need to do something about this, because waiting for 2 years, that seems like, an absolute no-no. What that future path looks like, hopefully we'll debate it here, Dan, because I know I'm furiously using all of the tools that I can get. And as a result, I can genuinely say, apart from the fact I'm training myself out of a job by clicking plus and teaching and all these things, but I can genuinely say I've become more creative, more productive. My writing's more, dare I say, it's better, more emotionally intelligent. The counter arguments that I can obtain from a system, extraordinary. And some of the ideas that I'm now putting into my writing and my training and my courses and everything else that I'm doing, phenomenal. So as an augmentation tool, this is allowing me to 10x the things that I'm doing in ways that I never thought possible. It's exciting the life out of me. And I know there's a gap between me and everyone else. That's why I'm in the industry that I'm in. That's why I'm learning and using the tools that I'm using. My fear is that those who haven't even hit the starting line, and I meet companies across the globe every day that I'm starting to train, they're starting to move in the direction that you're saying, and they will catch up in 6 months, 2 years, or whatever else. But those who aren't even aware that this train is coming, and I meet them all the time as well, that's the frightening part for me, because there will be massive repercussions, and we hope we don't get caught up in the tsunami of it. And that will take government, that will take business. And ultimately, as I said, the only thing I can control in life within reason is me. That's going to take me to do something about it before I wake up surprised some morning that I'm no longer employable.
Yep. Well, that's our time, but the good news is we're here to help. If you're listening to this and need some advice, some recommendations, or some coaching, hand holding, please reach out to us at erpaai.com/analysts. And if you're on the erpaai.com/provider subscriptions. Kieran, thank you so much, buddy. Always a pleasure. And in the meantime, everybody, will be back Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone. Good luck.
Take care. Cheers.